Welcome, everybody. This is Amanda Fuller. I'm with the Kentucky Academy of Science, and thanks for joining us today. We have a webinar with Dr. Shannon Galbraith-Kent from the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. I'm really excited to have her with us this hour. We've been talking about doing this for a while. I'm really excited to learn so much more about the fund and Shannon, what you do. I also want to take a minute to introduce my colleague, Rob Weber, who's our Policy and Communications Director. And Rob, if you don't mind, we have a couple events coming up soon. And if you don't mind to just let people know what those are.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. So coming up on October the 22nd, which is a Sunday at 3 p.m., we are partnering to screen a movie called Right to Read, which is about the science of reading. It presents literacy as a civil right. And so this movie is a documentary that focuses on advocates' efforts to get what's called the structured approach to literacy into schools in Oakland. This is a timely issue across the nation, including here in Kentucky, as more people try to bring about evidence-based literacy instruction to improve students' reading skills. So it's a compelling movie. It's being presented by, we're in partnership with Speed Cinema and the Courier Journal to show this movie. So 3 p.m. on October the 22nd. And Amanda, you mentioned a couple events. So what's the other one?
Well, I'll mention the annual meeting, and thanks. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thank you for doing that. I wanted to bring that to people's attention because the group that we have that works on policy for the Kentucky Academy of Science keeps our eyes on a lot of different policy issues. The Land Conservation Fund is one that's always on our radar because it's a budget issue with the state government. But of course, Rob heads up that committee, and there are lots of other policy issues that we pay attention to. So literacy is one, numeracy is one that's coming up too. We found out the other day. So yes, Rob, thanks for keeping us on task and paying attention to those things. The annual meeting, of course, is the other big thing that's coming up. Some of you are already registered, November 3rd and 4th. We're going to be at NKU. If you haven't already found it, it's kyscience.org. It's 2 days of science. It's the biggest science event of the year in Kentucky, and we're looking forward to a great program. Shannon will be there with information table about the fund for anybody who's missing this webinar. And we'll also have a field trip on Saturday to one of the locations where land has been purchased with the fund. So that's another place where we'll be highlighting this terrific work. All right, so thanks so much, Shannon, for joining us today. For folks who are not already aware, Dr. Shannon Galbraith-Kent at Thomas More University is currently the representative for the Kentucky Academy of Science that sits on the board that oversees the Heritage Land Conservation Fund. And ever since the 90s, when that was set up, the Kentucky Academy of Science has had representation on that board. So we're really glad that we have a role there. We're really glad for our members. Now Shannon and the person before you, Richie Kessler, who served us in that capacity for many years. Thankful for your leadership and thankful for making sure that science is at the table when decisions are made about land and funding. So eager to hear more about it. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Love to hear more about you and the work that you're doing there.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda and Rob. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and I'll start sharing my screen if that's okay. Get this up. Make sure we have this. All right. Can you all see that okay? Is that okay? Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Let me adjust a few things on my side here. All right, wonderful. So thanks so much, Amanda and Rob. And yeah, I'm excited to share this information with you all. It's for the role that it serves for conservation in Kentucky. It might not be as well known as it probably could be or should be. So really want to thank you for the opportunity to share that here with everybody. So I just want to give you a bit of background on myself as far as why I especially am very grateful for this role and how it helps to some of my past has helped to motivate me in the work that I'm doing on the board. So I got my bachelor's from Thomas More University and worked with Dr. Bill Bryant, who is actually a past KAS president. and did a lot of my undergraduate research at Boone Cliffs Nature Preserve, which is also a KHLCF site. My very first professional conference ever was actually at the Kentucky Academy of Science annual meeting that year, my senior year. I got my master's at Eastern Kentucky University. And my research was looking at old growth trends at Lilly Cornett Woods through Eastern Kentucky University. And my advisor there was Dr. Bill Martin, who was a past chairperson of the HLCF and very involved with that fund for many, many years. And so lots of connections there. Went on to get my PhD in New Jersey. And for the last 16 years, I've been a professor in our Department of Biological Sciences at Thomas More. And really enjoy getting students involved with presentations at KAS. And most of my research does involve Boone Cliffs and Dinsmore, which is another site that's here local in Northern Kentucky, also another HLCF site. And I joined the board during the pandemic. So I will tell you all, most of the meetings that I have participated in have been remote because of that. And so it's really in the last year where I've been able to kind of make some relationships and start to learn, have those conversations before and after meetings. As you all know, is so much of the understanding and relationship happens. So it's been a bit of a delayed integration for me on the board, but in the last year, it's been that has been picking up, which has been exciting and very, very helpful. So just to give you an idea, so I'm in Northern Kentucky, and this also gives you an idea of some of the sites that I'll be mentioning here in a few minutes for the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund has helped to purchase over the last, like Amanda said, since about 1990 within the state of Kentucky. Here are some of my students, just to kind of show you again that the connection that I have to both KAS and the Kentucky Heritage Land Fund is very much a kind of a part of where my background has been as an ecologist, as a plant ecologist in particular, studying at these two forests, including my students here in my current ecology class here on the bottom right. And making presentations at KAS on a site. So Boone Cliffs is a Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund property, and using those locations as ways to heighten the awareness of the KHLCF, but using those sites for long-term studies is certainly a way that us as part of the KAS community can get involved and to promote the resource that we have with these sites. We'll get into a little bit later, but this is this has certainly been an asset for myself and my students for many, many years. Okay, so these are the things I would like to share with you all today to go over the really kind of what the board is and some of the properties, some of the actual sites that the fund has helped to purchase, the process of how that happens, some budget concerns and trends that we're seeing, and then also a bit more of a direct connection to KAS. So like Amanda said, yeah, this was established in the early 90s, and its sole purpose is really to conserve natural areas in the state. What might not be known is that it is, as far as state funding goes, it is the sole source of state funding. Certainly we have funding at different county and local levels and nonprofits and so forth, but as far as like state dollars going to purchasing lands for conservation, it runs through this fund. This is where those dollars lie, and so those funds are used to purchase a wide variety of sites that you are likely familiar with, whether you realized, how the funds got to designating that nature preserve or that state park or that WMA. It's the money likely for a lot of those sites that you're maybe familiar with came through the conservation fund. The board itself, and it has changed a little bit as far as I'm not sure it was always 9, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure it was always 9 members, but currently it's 9 members. And you can see some of the representations from a wide variety of different groups. So Department of Parks, Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, who is a critical piece of all of this, and we'll talk more about them in a few minutes. Department of Fish and Wildlife, Kentucky Academy of Sciences, agricultural interests being kind of broadly represented, not from a specific entity, but having someone there who has that background and that representing those stakeholders. League of Kentucky Sportsmen, Department of Natural Resources, and then we also usually have a person with legal expertise on the board as well. So currently, this is the board for this time period. And thank you, Amanda, for mentioning. So two folks who especially were have been very big contributors in this role representing KES are both Dr. Richie Kessler and Dr. Albert Meyer, who also have been involved in KES annual meetings for many years. So they have provided really critical work, and I just want to acknowledge their contributions, which have been very extensive across the state in this area. Our board meetings, you guys, we meet quarterly. We actually have our next one next Wednesday. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stay on. If you want to email me, our next one is next Wednesday. And again, with the pandemic, obviously a lot of our meetings were remote, but we do meet in Frankfurt, but we do have typically a remote option. But we do meet quarterly at those dates. When folks are submitting for applications for purchasing properties, they do need to get their materials in at least usually 2 months before those meetings. So that's kind of what we're talking about over here on the left, what the applications do. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but again, we have four meetings a year. The Heritage Land Board is managed by the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, or OKNP. And we're not the only group that they manage. That group is extremely busy. They do really wonderful work in areas of conservation and biodiversity assessment and mitigation. They are extremely productive with the staff, and I'll show you the variety of folks who are working in the Nature Preserves office. Our fund is one of their 4 groups that they manage. But again, this fund, what makes this in particularly unique is that, again, this is where the funding comes through as far as the state goes. The other 3, of course, have specific kind of unique goals. The Wild Rivers program, obviously kind of with the name, what their mission is. But the Heritage Lands Conservation Fund, again, this is where the funding piece helps a variety of agencies and organizations. But the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves is managing this fund. Okay. And if you look at it from look at the structural hierarchy here within the state government, you can see you've got the Secretary of the Executive Cabinet. The Energy and Environment Cabinet is where the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves is housed. And again, they manage this fund. So this particular fund is going to lie in this cabinet right here underneath the governor's office. And you can see that if you go to the website, you'll notice the kind of the organization there based on the different cabinets that you can see. So again, some of the links there. And like I said, Amanda, thank you for posting the link. The annual report just came out just a couple weeks ago, and thanks to Stephanie Ellis, who is with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, who is extremely helpful whenever I have information, questions of information. She provided this for me and some other resources. But this is, again, housed under the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. We're one of the entities that they manage. And I just want to kind of highlight that group and all their work. You can see a wide variety. If there are any students or who are watching this, I want the students to see especially some of the variety of career pathways that you can see here, from being field botanists to technicians to those who work on prescribed fire burns for land management goals and so forth. So there are a wide variety of expertise levels and positions, but this is the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserve staff, which again, we work directly with the executive director for the KHLCF. We work directly with the executive director, who you saw was also a board member. Stephanie Ellis is a critical piece for help with administration. Josh Lil Pop and also Maddie Heredia has been also parts of really big contributors to a lot of the HLCF stewardship work that goes on, which is extremely valuable, extremely important for managing all these different sites. Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta mention Zeb Weiss also. So Zeb Weiss has also been very, let me come back here, a large part. He just retired, and I think he's coming back on to assist as well and to make contributions. But Zeb Weiss has also been a large part of the staff, as well as the HLCF in the last 10, 12 years. So I just want to highlight, just give you an idea of the breadth that office works on. Again, HLCF is part of their work. To give you an idea of all the things that go through that office, from data management and GIS, innovations, ways that they're managing data for large areas, large sets of data, with regards to making it accessible, making it as user-friendly to manage these lands most ecologically friendly and healthy for looking at future management. They do a wonderful job at really making these sites as open to the public and accessible, including ways, different apps and different ways to access these, from hiking to just enjoying and accessing the natural areas. The amount of outreach and education. So again, I'm not going to read all this. I just want to highlight to you, just kind of want to give the Office of Kentucky, the Nature Preserves Office, a shout out here, because they do an awful lot of really great work that spans a lot of different objectives and goals. Not just plans, but they're looking at bee inventories. They're doing a lot of really just wonderful work. And a lot of this again are not all the sites, but a lot of them have been purchased again with these funds from the HLCF. So let me talk about some of the properties, some of the locations, kind of break down what those look like. Again, the process of how those properties get decided and chosen, and then some of the trends that we're seeing with regards to revenue to make all those things happen. So again, one of the things is, as I think most folks maybe on this call are going to acknowledge the need for, is that we can purchase a property, but we need to make sure that there is some kind of easement or some kind of way that allows access and that allows the connection with that piece of property. And those are included in all the properties that are going to be purchased or agreed to be purchased. So far, over 95,000 acres have been purchased with funds from the HLCF. It's 174 properties, and over half of the counties in Kentucky at least have one HLCF. So that's some have more than one, but at least half of the counties in the state have at least one property that has been purchased with the benefit of this fund. If we kind of look at here at the distribution here, as far as some of the different sites that you can see. And again, if you want to, there is, trying to see, I don't know if it's in the annual report. This map comes directly from the annual report, you all, but I can try to see. I think there's you get a database that can link you to these specific sites, the names of the different sites and so forth. But you can get an idea of the representation. They range, you all, from, as far as acreage goes. As you can see here on the next page, this is just a screenshot from the first couple of properties that were listed by county here. They range from a couple of acres to here 11,000 or 40,000 acres. There's a wildlife management area in Western Kentucky, Peabody wildlife management area, that's around 40,000 acres. That's the biggest one, but they range pretty greatly in sizes. But you can see the different projects, and the agencies are going to differ. So remember, there are different different agencies that are allowed to apply for these funds. We'll get to that in a second, but the representation across the state, again, about half of the counties in the state have at least one site that has been purchased with these funds. And you can see the applicants here. So again, I'll get into the process in a minute, but you can see here are the applicants. So applicants who, if there's a piece of property that is desirable for conservation and they'll apply, these are where these applicants are coming from. Okay, these are where the applicants are coming from, and the number of projects, the total acreage that's conserved from that, and then the amount that was asked for that. So again, what's nice is that when somebody applies for funding for a property, we're looking at also including an easement, something where we can always access that land, or some kind of deed restriction. And then we're also asking for management costs as well. So not only, we want to make sure that we've purchased the property, we have access to it, but we have a way to maintain it and to manage it, rather than just buying the property and then crossing our fingers that the management questions and the costs that come up will be somehow fulfilled in some way. Is that those are worked into those proposals and those project awards. So we've got, again, the projects kind of based here by these different groups as far as the ones that have been awarded. Again, this is over almost a little bit more than a 30-year period here. And if we break that down to kind of broadly these categories, if we take that data on the left there, as far as the applicants who had awarded properties, it looks like something like this. So from a state level, right, the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves is here. The state, the other departments, so like Division of Forestry, the Department of Parks, those groups would be in this bucket here. And then non-state governments, right, these are county, city governments, county governments, metro governments, those entities would be here. So you can see the vast majority of applicants have either been from a state or government group. These others over here are wild rivers. These are the green here, conservation districts, right? So every county has a conservation district. Universities and colleges, right? So there are eight of the 174, and then some multiple agency partners, which includes sometimes maybe an individual along with maybe the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, if somebody is either donating or has land that they're donating and want to work with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. That can sometimes fall under that multiple agency partner, as well as some other combination where there might be maybe Fish and Wildlife and Forestry want to work in on a particular piece of property. So yeah, there's kind of the breakdown as far as the awards that are the properties that are being awarded to the different applicants for the different projects or the different sites. So right, so that's such a critical piece. And as far as the process, right? So the process of property acquisition, how this looks from an evaluation standpoint when somebody submits a proposal to get funding. The priorities that have been established through legislation has focused on really these four aspects here. So rare and endangered species, migratory birds, any areas that are performing some kind of ecosystem or ecological function that's likely subject to some kind of loss or altercation, and then other areas that we can keep in their natural state for public use or recreation or education, and that can be certainly used in a wide variety of ways. But these are some of the priorities as far as what properties maybe would hold greater value as we're evaluating those. So as far as the eligibility, and again, kind of that, how do we get to that list of those applicants to begin with? There is a portion of the fund that is set aside for the Kentucky state government agencies. So the Kentucky Nature Preserves, Division of Forestry, Department of Parks, right? And so there is a bucket of funds where that's available to those groups that are identifying areas through their work where they see a benefit for purchasing property through the various aspects of the work that they're doing in their organizations. Beyond that, then there are competitive funds that are available for organizations that are eligible. And those organizations include these right here. Okay, these are all the different groups that are eligible. So this is where you see the conservation districts, you see the county and city governments, you see colleges and universities, nonprofits, right? And so a lot of all those other groups that you see that we saw in that pie chart, all very much eligible for applying for these funds. So these are all the different groups that, so if an applicant falls under one of these categories, they could apply for funding to purchase property with HLCF funds. Yeah, again, the decisions are made by the board. So again, the nine members, and there is as you saw in there, there's a variety of kind of interest and background. From my point of view, as the KAS representative, certainly looking at ways that it's going to benefit the community, ways that from an ecological perspective is going to enhance biodiversity, it's going to be an ecologically sound decision. That's where I'm coming from as I come to those conversations. And other groups, that other representatives are coming in maybe slightly different ways, but we're all trying to work together to try to make the best decisions for which properties are going to be best suited for conserving natural areas in Kentucky. So yeah, this shows you. And so Stephanie Ellis, I just want to kind of give a nice kind of recognition of her. She's incredible, works in the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, but is really one of the ones who folks who helps to keep the process moving and keep these materials ready for us to review and so forth. And they provide an immense set of resources. So if somebody is interested in trying to apply for funds to purchase property, there's a lot of materials that are available to help out an organization or in that process. So this is kind of just showing you all some screenshots as far as if someone were to look for purchasing property or what that looks like. This is some of that information here. With COVID, how many times do we use that preface for any sentence or conversation? So there's been the process of reviewing and awarding properties has been really slow. So many things slow down, of course, and in this process here, and the work of this particular board was no exception. And that's why I say I think in the last year I've kind of gotten up to speed a bit more, but the first 2 years was really, really pretty quiet, to be honest with you. But in this past year, so prior properties that have been acquired, this is a tiny little 1 acre tract, but a nice buffer on a small river, so that was acquired. And two were awarded. So these two right here, I'm going to come back to this here in 1 second. These two were awarded, and again, you can in the annual report feel free to take a look at those two, especially if you're especially of interest in those. But 2 properties were awarded. It takes a while. The process is slow. I'll be honest. The process is slow, and there's some good reason for that, right? Some due diligence. The time that it takes for submission, for review, we often will send that back to maybe the applicant. It takes a while, and then you add on some of the legal layers onto all this. So it can take a couple years sometimes to purchase land that with these funds, but it's just give you some insight just on what that looks like. But it can be a little bit of it can be a longer process than a typical kind of residential purchase. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget trends. This, of course, is important for helping us to purchase those, give the money out. We have to have the money first before we can award the money to organizations to purchase that property. The money that supports the fund, again, this is the only fund at the state level that is used for purchasing land for conservation. The money from that comes from 3 buckets. One is from the nature license plate. So if you have a nature license plate, thank you. You have directly contributed to this process in conserving land in the state. The other one comes from unmined mineral taxes, particular on coal. I'll talk about that in a second. And then also environmental fines. So organizations who are maybe not adhering to the regulations on a project, they are going to submit fines that then do get funneled to this fund in particular. Another group, also the Kentucky Environmental Education Council, also is receiving money from the fines that are submitted to. So we're sharing that pot with them. The unmined mineral taxes. So if you think about your own property or maybe your car, right? These are natural resources that are beneath the ground that do have value. And so whoever owns the land and they have coal on that land, they're being taxed for that resource. The value of coal has declined over the years. So the taxes that come from someone who has coal on their land has also decreased. So just like we might have a car that depreciates over time, if you have coal on your land, that has depreciated over time and you're paying fewer taxes on those. So that has had a direct impact on this fund in particular, and we'll show you that here in a second. So we have three areas that, oops, let me come back here. We have three buckets. Most of we do have some donations. Of course, we do have some interest that is generated, but as far as active revenue streams, we have the license plates, we have the fines from the environmental fines, and then we have the unmined taxes, mostly from coal. And what we can see, if we go back in the last good 10-year trend here, 2013 to now, we see we see the impact of the pandemic right there, right? We see the impact of the pandemic. It's coming back up a bit, to more of what we saw before the pandemic. But you see, look at the change here in the unmined taxes, right? We went from almost $3 million 10 years ago to basically nothing at this point. And with that, just like the Environmental Education Council will get a portion of the fines here, we share that bucket with them, so we don't get all of them. The unmined mineral taxes, the Office of Energy Policy, which is indicated in the second to last row here, they're going to receive the first $400,000 from those unmined mineral taxes. So if they're lower than that, we don't get any of it. And that's what we see here. We see a lot of that being removed, is that those deductions, right? So if you look at 2020, unmined mineral taxes was $166,000. Well, it's below $400,000, so they got to keep all of that. So we see a decline, and the impacts are pretty direct. So if you look at those totals, right, we think about all those, we look at those three buckets, again, adding interest and any donations, which again, in the scheme of the others, it's pretty minimal. The trend is pretty stark. It's pretty clear what we're looking at here as far as funding goes. So how can we connect? How can we impact this? A little bit of a summary and maybe some steps forward. So again, I just want to reiterate, it's sometimes kind of surprising that this is the only fund that you would think it might be separated a little bit more, but this is where most of that funding from a state level is housed. Again, with those three revenue streams. Of course, we have other projects happening, but again, this is the only state funding for conservation. And if we look at those two different areas, we see, again, some serious declines, especially with the unmined mineral taxes. So what that means is that, you know, the board is looking at, especially the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, you know, they manage the board. So they are looking for, they're asking in the state budget for a considerable amount of money to help to make up for these losses that are happening in these areas for the revenue. So that's what's happening now, is that trying to request that, make the statement, show that this is not a sustainable model for a funding perspective for this fund any longer, as the role of coal has changed dramatically in the state, right? That shift has impacted, oddly enough, you know, the way that we can conserve land in the state. So we have to really, there has to be a shift in how this is structured. So what can we do in the meantime, right? And so I was talking with Zeb Weiss, who again has been very active in the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, has done a lot for conservation across the state. We were talking, he said, we first of all purchased the plates, right? So there is a substantial amount of money that does come through those purchases. So that's something we can all do on an individual level if you have a vehicle. I would encourage you all to, if it's not possible for you, but any KAS members, anybody in the community who has access or the ability to engage somehow on one of these sites. Again, I think the number of sites across the state is maybe surprising to some. But there are lots of ways in which you can engage with it. If we increase maybe the heightened awareness of the value that this fund has brought to the state through research, through student involvement, civic engagement, right, citizen science, there are so many different ways that we can show, hey, when we have funds for this, when we have revenue for this fund, we can make these purchases, and the impacts are tangible. I will speak from just personal experience that these are perfect for long-term studies. So the work that I do at a couple of the forests I mentioned, I'll mention Lily Cornett Woods especially as well, is that these are protected areas. They're supported, they're protected, and they're perfect for long-term studies, right? That could be used for a variety of science disciplines. So these are, I would just encourage folks to maybe engage in some way with these sites. I would love to hear, and this is on me to really kind of get a better feel for what work is being done at these sites through people who are in the KAS community, either historically or who are actively doing work. Again, whether that's you're volunteering, you're taking a group out as a service project and you're clearing honeysuckle, or maybe you have a research site, or you've participated in a research program that has been going on for 20 or 30 years. I'm not sure if Albert or Richie have that. I can certainly, I'll connect with them, but for me, when I'm talking with folks on the board and that they can have in their conversations, this is the direct value. This is how these places are being used by people in the KAS community, both from their own professional perspective, but then maybe also their personal perspective, taking out a group of, you know, kids to do a service project. Raising awareness of the value of all these sites, I think, is something that could be very, very productive as we're moving forward and trying to ensure funding in the future. Definitely connect with Rob, right? As far as, you know, the conversations he's having, and those when we're talking, you know, communications, any kind of policy, those, please engage with Rob and make that a way to maybe make a contribution if you're able. And then also your state representative, right? I mean, so those are some things as well. So all of these things could be ways that we could help to, again, encourage the funding for the fund and illustrate its importance in a variety of ways. So yeah, so I want to go ahead and wrap up. And so these are some of the things I just wanted to, sorry if I took too long on this, but I think it's important because I think it's a little confusing. There are lots of acronyms in any government. And I want to make sure that folks kind of understood where this fund was housed and its role, to give some background there for understanding its purpose. And like Amanda said, we'd love to see you at the meeting. Feel free to see me at one of the tables, or send me an email. Make sure we can meet up if you want to talk more. I would love to certainly do that. Just want to thank all these folks here, and I will be happy to take some questions at this point. So.
Wow, thank you. This
All
has
right.
been perfect. Yes, thank you. You
Sure.
gave us so much here. And I want your slides, actually, if you don't mind. to
Yeah.
share. I'd love to share
Yeah.
those with folks
For
afterward.
sure. For sure.
Great. Well, if folks have questions, I would love to hear some questions. We have about 17 minutes. So what questions people have for Shannon? Either you can put in the chat or just take yourself off mute if you have anything you want to ask.
I'll go first if that's okay.
Hey, Rob.
You mentioned that that you'll be seeking a considerable amount of money from the next state budget for the fund. Are you able to say how much that amount is, just so we can?
I thought about that. Rob,
yeah.
I don't know if I can say that or not. I'm not.
That's fine.
I really don't know. I was thinking about that before. I should have asked. I should have emailed and asked that. But I've written that down. Let me ask the folks, and then I can send that to you for sure. Okay. No, I wish I had gotten that answer before we started the call. Yeah.
Okay. Then one follow up on a different topic.
Right.
So the applications for money from the fund that you've seen in recent years, can you characterize those in any way, whether or not they're down because people know funding has declined, or are they coming from a certain parts of the state to protect a certain characteristic of areas?
That's a great question. Like I said, I will say we have only looked at 2 or 3 the last 3 years. And I think it was because the decline then was mostly, I think, because of folks not being out, offices being shut because of the pandemic. I don't think that was necessary. People were still, I mean, there were some that were just kind of in a queue waiting for work to be done with it, but people were not able to get the work done because of the pandemic. That was really the biggest thing. As far as like characterizing the different applications, that's a great question. So we saw the one that had like a small tract. Some that was on a riparian area, large area in Kingdom Come, State Park. I've with only the 3 years experience, I've not seen anything that's like there's a clear pattern as far as like the type of land that's being asked for, or the organization. So no clear patterns right now. I don't see anything. Again, just in the 3 years, and I don't think anybody's. I don't think the fund decreased. Again, with the fund, let me come back to looking back at. I'm going to share my screen. Looking back at. I think, I mean, folks were still, I mean, there were still a few applications, and they literally were just kind of sitting and waiting for action from other groups that were not moving as quick because of the pandemic. So there were still some applications that were sitting from 2019, 2020. I don't think people were really being affected so much by the budget itself.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah.
There are questions out there? I have one if nobody else has anything to say, but speak up. Stephanie, go ahead.
I have a quick question. So you were talking about engaging with the lands, like by doing research or citizen science. Is there any infrastructure for that? And if there is, how can we access that? And if there isn't, are there talks about developing something to help people do that?
That's
That
a
is my question.
great question. Thank you. Let me pull up. So yeah, not that I'm aware of. There's not really an infrastructure that I'm aware of. What I would suggest is, you can, let me pull this up one more time. Sorry, Amanda, for going back and forth here on the slide. That's a great question, Stephanie. I think I'm not aware of an infrastructure there specifically, but what's nice is that in the annual report, you can get an idea of the kind of the vast array based on county, based on size, and then the agency. So for instance, again, I have connections with several of the groups here in Boone County. I might reach out to those organizations or somebody, or if you feel free to contact me and I could help to facilitate that connection. There's not a set infrastructure there. That's a great question. But I would be happy to help anybody who is looking to, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was in my county, or I didn't realize this is literally right next to my campus. I would be certainly happy to help to facilitate and get you in contact with the folks who are managing that property.
We could also
Thank you.
mention that there are some of our field stations in our state network of field stations. Some of those are properties, or part of the properties have been purchased with the fund.
That's right.
So Stephanie, if you're looking for spaces to do research, not all of those field stations have been purchased or have a connection to the land fund, but it is a fairly well organized network. And Stephen Richter has left us, but he was here for most of the hour, and he's been involved in that network, and is partly responsible for
as a field
putting that
station
group together. And so that field station is one that you mentioned, Shannon, where you've done research.
Yeah,
but there
Lily
are a bunch of
Cornett.
others. And NKU's field station is going to be one that's on the tour in a few weeks. So that's another network to tap into.
That's right.
Which had been purchased with the fund.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the Kentucky Organization of Biological Field Stations, Stephen Richter at EKU, who manages the Lily Cornett Woods. Thank you for mentioning it. So there is that group across the entire all 174 properties. There really isn't, but that's Amanda, that's an excellent place to start for sure.
I'll see if I can find that link to their site.
Yeah,
in the chat for you.
Right. Thank you.
It's in the chat now.
Thank you.
Fast.
Teamwork.
Ted has a question.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
I'm with Nature Preserves. I just wanted to chime in to say that for anyone that wants to engage with any of our sites, if you look us up, there's a general phone number. I'll put my email in the chat though here in a sec. Feel free to shoot me an email as well, and I can point you in the right direction. I manage some of our Frankfurt area preserves, but I can get people in contact with whatever region, or if you're interested in stuff, because there's a small portion of at least our nature preserve sites are generally open to the public, but we can do research permits and other stuff for other places, and the application process for that is not too crazy. It's pretty standard what you'd expect. But yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat, and feel free to send me questions or anything about that, and I can point you in the right direction as well.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. And like I said, and I've worked a lot with Stephanie, and your all's office is just really outstanding. So thank you.
Hello, I have a question. This is Don Dodd.
Hi, how are you?
All right. Really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
The question was, you said that with the unmined minerals taxes dropped off so much, as I think the primary drop in the revenue for the fund, and that the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves is submitting a request to the legislature for direct appropriations. Do you know if there's any other things that are being considered, or investigations into other funding mechanisms to maybe replace the unmined minerals tax with something else? Is there been discussions with the board about that? Do you know?
That not that I'm aware of. That's the main method right now. That's the main ask right now. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No.
Frankly,
not really. What's that? I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
But frankly, could use a bigger one than that was. Even when it was coming in, I think the most it hit in a year was maybe $5 million, or maybe in a few years or more than
It
that.
was.
We're talking about the entire state of Kentucky. We need a
It's-
better funding mechanism for this thing.
Agreed. And that's so yeah, I will just say the amount that was requested is a lot more than that. So
Oh,
I'm
great.
trying to, so yeah, I don't want to over, you know, I'm relatively new to the board. I don't want to make a mistake, but I want to share, but it is, yes, I definitely agree with your statement, and the request is for a lot more than 5 million. But yeah, you're
We'll
right.
get your attention.
Yes. And so yeah, I'm looking back at that. Yeah, it was the last time it was 5,019,000 in 2013, and then right at 5 million in 2015. So as far as like just looking at that 10-year span, that's where it was, that's where it topped off.
And I don't know if either of you could speak to this. I don't have this at my fingertips, but to put it in context, Dawn, you're absolutely right. Like $5 million is really nothing. There are other states that have dedicated real money for land conservation. I don't know if either of you could speak to that, but we are punching a little bit under our weight in terms of conservation in Kentucky, and this kind of resource.
Well, I know I'm a little bit rusty on this. I know Virginia has a much larger fund. North Carolina has a much larger fund. At one time, there was an effort, dates back to, I think about 2004 or 5, to get more funding for the Heritage Board before the economy tanked. And we were looking at the surrounding states just for comparison purposes. And at that time, Kentucky had less conserved land. When you're looking at everything from parks to nature preserves, to forests and everything, and agriculture, was less than any of the 7 surrounding states. As far as money spent, I'm not sure we were behind everybody, but we were close to it. So that kind of needs to be updated. But yeah, we need to get some of this information together and go approach the legislature about it somehow, and hopefully change things, get a new funding mechanism, or, you know, direct appropriations are great, but that's going to change every year. And you got to get them to, well, not every year, every 2 years, but you got to get them to prove that every 2 years. So we could set up a tool like that unmined minerals tax, where that revenue from that source was coming into this fund every year, subject to that changing over time as things do. Might be a better way to go. So I know there is the Kentucky Conservation Committee has been looking into that recently. I haven't seen the information they put together, but if you're familiar with them, or contact Lane Boldman, their executive director, that she had somebody doing research on that as to what other states' funding mechanisms are. So maybe we could pick up one of those, or some variation of, and get it adopted here in Kentucky would be great.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, that I know. Yeah, I don't have the numbers at my tips either, but I know that it's been discussed as far as how far underfunded, certainly comparing other states. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing that.
We want to make our representatives on that board work. We want to put them to work, give them something to do. Any other questions for Shannon in the last few minutes here, before we let her go? Okay, well, maybe Shannon, if you don't mind to put your email in the chat.
That's what I was, yeah, that's
Okay,
what I was
great.
getting to do. I was just getting ready to do. I was just pulling up the
Well,
yeah, let me put that in, and feel free, you all, yeah, to email me, and or like I said, if you'll be at the annual meeting, I'll be there throughout really that time at different places. So I'd love to meet up and chat with you if you're wanting to talk about any of this and have good questions. So I appreciate you all showing up and the conversation today. It's the importance is obvious. So I really appreciate your contributions and interest.
thank you. And thank you for the suggestions. I mean, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into those suggestions as far as like what scientists.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Also, we'll be in touch with you about all of those great ideas. All right. Thanks everybody for being here today. I'm going to stop the recording now.
All right.